you know what I could do? I'm pretty sure I figured out how to run a scam where the bank doesn't know I ripped them off.
Did anybody tell you your story is in a way like Jordan Belfort?
I mean,
Wolf of Wall Street? But you know, sometimes arrogance and narcissism takes over at a certain point. You know, you say, when I was making money, people would come up to me and said, Michael, why don't you stop? You got all this money and this and that. And I said, you know what? You get as much time for $1 million as you do for $1 billion, so I may as well just keep going. That was my head at the time.
Yeah, not true.
No. That's what I thought about. But anyway, continue.
I walk in redemption.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody is doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to my God for that. Matthew Cox is my guest today, and very, very interesting guy. You know, they called him the king of con, you know, big fraud guy. And turned his life around, did 13 years in prison, but the things that he did were pretty incredible. You know what got me about Matthew? He had a learning disability, so it was a little tough for him in school. And yet he's a pretty brilliant guy. The scams that he pulled off are pretty amazing, really, to think about it, to create them, to implement them, to execute them, and see the fruits of what he did. It's pretty amazing. You know, don't sell short all these guys that come up with these schemes. It may be criminal activity, and of course we don't advocate for that. They shouldn't be doing it. It's wrong. He says that. You know, he's not justifying anything that he did, but pretty brilliant guys. My former partner, Larry Irizzo, in the gas business, brilliant guy. You know, the schemes that he would concoct, you know, and bring to me that I kind of refined a little bit, you know, and took the rough edges off, I would say, and make sure that we can execute. Brilliant guy. But you know what got me with these guys? It's not so much the money that comes in the end. It's creating the scheme, executing the scheme, and getting over on the people he's trying to get over on. With us, it was the federal government. Hey, I enjoyed that at that time. But it's pretty amazing. But, you know, I bring people like this on. Matt's got a very high profile. He actually did a commercial for LifeLock. He's kind of like Frank Abagnale, if you remember Catch Me If You Can. He used all his expertise to now help the government, you know, detect that kind of fraud. Jordan Belfort is doing pretty much the same thing, letting people know how he committed all these frauds. He's out as a public speaker. Matthew's doing the same. Abagnale the same. Barry Minkow, my good friend, you know, did some crazy things and now trying to turn their lives around. So I bring him on because I want you to listen. You know, mortgage fraud is big today. Title fraud is big today. You got to watch out. Senior citizens, I'm one of you. Of course, I'm a little more in tune with this stuff because of my background. But you got to be careful when people are soliciting you on the telephone. Whenever you do something, whether it be mortgage related, real estate related, make sure you know who you're working with. A lot of scams out there today, and online scamming makes it even easier to get to people. And people that don't know, that are just legitimate people, they don't know that people are trying to get over them. So listen to what Matt has to say. Again, did his crimes. He spent I think 3 years on the road as a fugitive. And this was after he knew he was being sought after. He goes on the road, does the same exact thing as a fugitive very successfully. And then he does 13 years in prison. He'll tell you that, you know, everybody gave him up, and he in turn gave people up because that's what legitimate people do. They're not mobsters that take an oath not to do that. That's what they do. You know, they cooperate at the end of the day when they get caught. So, you know, and that's just what they do. But listen to that. And now, like I said, he's done a commercial for LifeLock. He's got a lot of podcasts. He's doing things, you know, to try to use the benefit of his experience and his schemes to educate others so that they don't fall into those traps. So listen to Matt. I think you're going to enjoy him. And here he is, Matt Cox. I don't even know where to begin. I kind of, you know, looked in your past a little bit and seen a lot of stuff that you've done on YouTube and a couple of articles, and wow, that's all I could say. You really got around, I would say.
Right.
You know. So why don't you kind of tell my viewers how things started with you? And I really absorbed a lot. A very interesting, crazy story. Obviously, you were very good and pretty brilliant at what you did, you know, to get away with it for that long. But I thought I did a lot of stuff. You were just really out there. But
The U.S. attorney, I think the word was prolific.
I like that word. That's a good one. Yeah.
At some point, basically, I was on the Secret Service's most wanted list, and ultimately, I think it was like $55 million. Mm-hmm. I owned a mortgage company. I mean, the way it starts is I owned a mortgage company, and I started as a mortgage broker, and I started just changing documents, one thing here, one thing there, that loan that, it like has to close. And especially when I first started, I was broke. So I'm behind on all my bills. Like I'd bet everything to be a broker. And I was, my first loan, I whited out a 30-day late because my borrower had been 30 days late and she wasn't going to be able to get the loan. So if all I had to do was white it out and send it to underwriting, and hopefully it closed, and it did close, and I made $3,500, and that was a ton of money. That caught me up on everything, and that it just from there it became changing a W-2 so the person could get the loan, or changing a pay stub, or changing let's say a verification of deposit, like bank statements.
But wasn't that kind of common in the industry at that time?
It was common.
To do things, little adjustments, I would call it at that time.
Right, but every time you do it, it's fraud. Mm-hmm. And so I mean, you're right. Like it was prevalent, and as a result, doing it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it was a big deal. It was, every time it's fraud, but nobody looked that down on it. It's not like mm-hmm. people were offended by it. And obviously, I told myself I'm helping this person out. I justified it. I'm helping her. She needs a house. She's got a kid. Mm-hmm. And then it grew and it grew, and eventually I ended up opening my own mortgage company. And I then kind of almost started specializing in doing fraudulent loans. Like I hired about 10 or 12 guys. And so if someone came in, and we were an FHA approved lender, a VA approved, conventional, subprime. So if somebody came in and they were a perfect customer, then you basically say, okay, well, I'll have Susan talk to you. Like I wasn't even interested in doing, like there's no challenge in that. I just collect the documents, send it in, you get the loan. I was more excited about the person that really needed help.
Was this during the subprime era?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, it was absolutely.
And were all these applications eventually going to a bank, or were they going to private lenders also, private institutions?
No, they were all going to banks and financial institutions. Like they weren't going to hard money guys. They were all going to like finance companies and banks, lenders and banks. And at some point, I got married. My wife and I started buying properties, and we would, you cherry pick them. Mm-hmm. You get a quadplex, you buy it, you fix it up, you go, oh, it's great, it's making $1,000 a month profit, let's keep it. Maybe another one comes and you say, it's not that great, I could probably sell it and make 30, 40 grand. If we buy it, put 50,000 into it, and we could sell it and make 30 grand, 50, whatever. So I had done that, we had like 50 some odd rental units, and there were a few of them that we were renovating and selling. And the way I would do it is I would buy it in my name, and I'd renovate it. And so let's say I buy it for $100,000. I put 50 into it. Now it's worth $250,000, let's say. Mm-hmm. I can sell it, but if we wanted to keep the loan, I would sell it to my wife. Mm-hmm. Because there's something called seasoning, which says if you buy a house, you buy a house for 100, you put 50 in it. For the first year, they'll only give you the value of 150.
Right.
A year later, they'll say, okay, we'll give you the market value. I didn't want to wait a year. So I would sell it to my wife in her maiden name, which is a non-arm's length transaction, and I would close that loan at a different mortgage company, which was a friend of mine, a girl that was a friend of mine. And her name was Gretchen, and we were friends. She had worked for me for a time. And so what happened was the FBI, she ran what's called a straw man scam. Mm-hmm. A straw man scam is, you get somebody to buy the house for top dollar. Say a house is selling for $500,000, but you can get it appraised at $800,000. So you have a qualified buyer buy it for $800,000. You make $300,000. You give them $100,000. You keep a couple $100,000, whatever. Well, she had been a part of that. Somebody had come to her and they were doing this 2 or 3 times. Well, they never made the first payment. So it's a first payment default. FBI investigates. Next thing you know, FBI raids their office. Well, they walked in and said, we want all your stuff. Well, she came to me and asked me, can you refinance my house? I need $75,000 to pay my federal criminal defense attorney.
Right.
Sure, no problem. So I refinanced her house. She gives me fake W-2s and pay stubs. And literally, I mean, the loan goes through, pays the attorney. The first thing the attorney says is, so this guy refinanced your house, and you need to wear a wire on this guy. You need to set this guy up. And so she goes to the FBI. She says, I'll cooperate. I got a guy I can give you. And because she was on the hook for about $500,000. Mm-hmm. So she's going to do some time. Like if for $500,000, you're probably going to do 6 months. Even if you have no criminal record, you're going to do some time. So what she did was she called me up one day and said, hey, can I talk to you? And I was like, sure. What's up? And I didn't want her to come by my office because everybody knew her office. The FBI was investigated. Mm-hmm. So, she walks in, people might start quitting. You don't know.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's meet at the pizza place. So we go down, we meet at the pizza place. She and her husband are there. And she says, listen, the FBI has been asking questions about you.
Did you suspect anything at that moment?
No, but I'm such an idiot. Like, I'd seen The Godfather. And so, you don't talk. She's my friend. Yeah. We went to Puerto Rico together. We go on vacation. We went to Disney. We babysat each other's kids. Mm-hmm. We're good friends. So I just refinanced your house. I got you the money to pay for your attorney. So, and everybody else was like, stop talking to him, stop talking. My wife.
Oh, so you were kind of warned.
Oh, everybody, and especially my wife. Now, my wife knows people and has family members that had gone to prison and stuff. But I'm like, what are you talking about? She's not going to say anything. So I go and I meet her. She and her husband walk in. They sit down. And I remember they put their cell phones down. Like, I didn't think about any of this.
What year was this?
This was 2000. This was 2000. So they put their cell phone, and it may have been nothing. They may have had a body wire on. I don't know. For some reason, as soon as it all happened, I remember thinking, why are both of their phones right next to me? Like, who puts their phone over there? So anyway, she said, listen, the FBI is asking questions about you. And I went, what? And the heat shot up from my knees through my whole body. I'll never forget. I was just like, what? Well, what do you mean? She goes, yeah, I gave them they came in, they asked for all of our files, and I gave them your files. And you gave them my files? And she's like, yeah, and they're asking questions, about your about your wife, my ex-wife now, but my wife and Kayla. They're asking questions about her, and I was like, oh my God! She was there. Yeah, they're asking like if you're married, if about her employment. I go, oh my God! You didn't tell them the W-2s are fake, did you? You didn't tell them the pay stubs are fake. You didn't tell them that we're married. I mean, like,
told them everything. Basically.
Oh, just blah, threw it all up and said all this stuff, and then I remember I said, okay, listen. She says, what do you want me to tell them? And I went, look, here's what you're going to tell them. Tell them that she called on the phone. You've never actually met her in person. And she said, no. She's, I can't lie to the FBI. And I went, what are you talking about? I said, you've been lying to the FBI. I said, you're lying to them now. I said, I just refinanced your house. And I remember her husband stood up and said, we've never lied to the FBI. We may not have told them everything, but we've never lied. And it's like, why would you say that? Yeah. Like, I know that's not true. So right then I thought, oh my God, like, you're not telling this to me. You're telling somebody else, which is clearly not here. And I just looked at her and I said, wow. I was like, I hope you're going to get something for this. And she goes, I don't have to go to jail.
So you realized it at the table.
At that moment, I said, wow. She goes, Matt,
did you try to grab the phone or anything like that?
No. I just was like, and I was good thing too, because it turns out later I realized that the FBI agent was sitting in the room. He was sitting there eating a piece of pizza. So I just, I stood up and I said, tell them to call me. Do not come into my office. And I walked out, and we're talking about 20 minutes later. I hadn't been in the office 5 minutes, and my secretary walks in and goes, there's an agent Scott Gale on the telephone. And I was like, okay. Picked up the phone, told him I'd come in and talk to him. He wanted to talk to me. He said, I'm sure you know what this is about. Mm-hmm. Like, they weren't even pretending.
Right.
And I said, yeah, I'll come in, and we scheduled a time. And then over the next few days, I interviewed 3 or 4 different attorneys, found an attorney, paid him $75,000, never met with the FBI. He canceled that meeting. We went back and forth. By the time as it progressed, we sold those houses. So So these three or four properties are now gone. Like, these mortgages don't even exist. And they wanted to indict my wife. Well, really, here's the funny thing. This, because at the time I didn't even really probably understand what it meant. But I remember my attorney said, when I went in and met him, he said he had called the U.S. attorney, and he said, "How close are you with your wife?" And I went, well, is it a good marriage? And I went, yeah, it's all right. We fight, we argue, whatever. I said, why? He said, because you didn't sign anything. Like, they've got 3 mortgages. They're all her mortgages. You haven't signed anything. He's like, I could probably pretrial intervention. He's like, the mortgages, like, those loans don't even exist anymore. So technically, he said, if you go in and cooperate, I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I wouldn't, And then he said, okay, well, what about this? What about going to your office? And apparently the U.S. attorney said you're running a boiler room. No, he said a mill or a boiler room of fraud. And he said, why don't you go in to the office, go grab 10 of the most egregious files from your brokers and bring those in. He's like, I'm trying to keep you from being indicted. You haven't been indicted yet. Like, at this point, we can divert this. And I'm not gonna do that. Listen, if I'd known then what I know now, I would have grabbed a dolly and walked into the Friday meeting and scooped up a file cabinet and wheeled it right out and said, listen, you guys, the FBI is going to be calling some of you guys. I suggest you get an attorney. And I'd have brought the whole file cabinet in there. Because the moment, it turns out later, the moment that I got in trouble, all of those guys were ready to cooperate against me.
Well, that's how it goes, especially in the legitimate world. But let me ask you a question. All of these loans, I just want your opinion on this. Let's say you did change your W-2,
right,
or you did leave out a couple of late payments that were made or something to make the file look better. Loan goes through, and the loan is paid back.
Right.
No damage.
Right.
Everybody's happy. Bank makes money. They get their money. You think that's criminal?
It's criminal because you lied to the bank to get the loan, right? So it's criminal. But there's no dollar loss. So if the way it's set up right now, if there's no dollar loss and you have no criminal record and you're convicted of bank fraud, you don't go to jail. There's no dollar loss.
I'm kind of relating that to what happened with Trump.
Yeah, Trump's different because Trump, he didn't provide any fraudulent documents.
He inflated the values.
See, I disagree there. He said, he felt, I feel, look, everybody does this. Everybody does it.
It's common.
Right.
When I say inflated, I'm not saying that's what he did, but that's what they accuse him of, inflating values. Who doesn't do that?
Right. Well, right now you could say, my house is worth, $6 million.
Yeah.
If they say, what do you think your house is worth? I think it's worth $6 million. Why? Well, because there's a house kind of like mine that sold a half a mile away, and this one, and my house is much nicer, and so I feel like mine's worth $6 million. And then the bank comes out and they say it's worth $5.2 million, not $6 million. Oh, okay. Well, you're not an appraiser. Like, that's why if they're going to take your word for it, they don't need an appraisal. Mm-hmm. Like, that's how it goes. It can work in the opposite. What if you said, I don't know, it's got a leak and the carpet's bad in the back. It's probably worth, I don't know, $5 million. What if the bank sends somebody out and said, oh, it's worth 5.3? They're not arresting, oh, you lied to the bank. That's why they have an opportunity to do their due diligence.
It's not really a crime. Like, if I were to say, oh, my house, it's in an area where every house is selling for $3 million. Yeah, but I'm a former gangster. I have a YouTube platform. People may want to pay an extra $500,000 just to say it was my house.
Right.
Is that wrong?
Well, I think that was I think that was part of Trump's. Like, are you telling me that somebody wouldn't pay more to buy, Kevin Costner's house?
Sure,
there's a portion of that's desirability to say, hey, Kevin Costner built this house. So I think that was part of Trump's argument, or may have. I'm not sure. I'd heard that on.
But there too, no victim.
Right.
Everybody get paid back. Actually,
no, I don't think what he did was what he did wasn't illegal.
Not
it would be
all.
different if he came in and said, I'm borrowing the money, and then gave them fake W-2 or fake tax returns,
right,
and inflated his worth, and they looked at that to determine whether he was able to pay back the loan, so he lied to him. In that case, I'm providing you documentation that where I'm lying to you. Okay, well that's fraud. But in his case, he just said, I think it's worth $82 million, and they came back and they said, it's not worth $82 million. It's worth $75 million. If the bank thought it was fraudulent, they would have said, oh, you just lied to us. We're not going to do the loan.
Or if he would have defaulted on a loan and the bank they took the property back and they could sell it for $2 million less than what he said it was worth.
Right.
Then they might have an argument.
Right.
That didn't happen. All the loans were paid. Everybody was happy. That was it. I didn't mean to digress, but it's just, I had to bring it up because it's a situation where you just get concerned on what the other side can do if they don't like you. That's it.
But they can, they can do whatever they want to do.
Whatever they want to do.
So, and especially in his case. But, let's face it, if the roles were reversed and it was, those departments were all run by conservatives and it was a liberal person, they could have done the same thing. They could manipulate the law. Yeah. It happens to be Trump. It's not, I don't think it's solely Trump. I just think that they've targeted him. And that's, if that's all they have, that's what's funny. That's all you've got? Yeah. I thought he was so corrupt. I thought he was so horrible. That's the best you can get is the way they say he inflated, he gave his opinion. They asked him his opinion. He didn't provide documentation showing that. This is my opinion. I think it's worth $600 million.
He didn't give a phony appraisal or anything like that. And his reputation was such that they said, okay, we'll lend you the money based upon that. Well, again, digress a little bit, but in your case, got to keep quiet when you're doing things like that. You can't share it around, it's something that we learn on the street. Don't share that kind of information. I tell you people now, young people, if you want to do a crime today, do it alone.
Right.
Don't tell anybody. Do it alone. You got the best shot. If you get in trouble, it's yourself putting you in trouble. That's it.
Well, I think I was 29 or 30 years old and extremely arrogant because every time I got away with something, it emboldened me. I just got more and more cocky. Like I always told my wife this. I'm like, every bad decision I've ever made in my life was based on arrogance. Like I can look back and say, you could have done this, but you chose not to. You did this. Why? Like even in this case, when that whole thing went down, one, I wouldn't cooperate. I said no, I'll take it, and I'll just my lawyer's telling me you're probably going to have to do some time, and I'm like, I don't see how those loans don't exist. There was never any potential loss. The properties were always worth more than I bought them for. So we had a little back and forth, and then he looked into it, came back. He's like, yeah, you're right. There's no dollar. There was no potential dollar loss because they'll charge you with potential dollar loss, which kills me. That's like going in the bank and saying, give me the money, and the cashier gives you $1,000, and you leave the bank and they catch you, and they charge you with all the money that's in the vault.
Yeah.
Well, potentially you could have gone in the vault.
Yeah.
You just didn't. Like, are you serious? That's not what happened. That wasn't even my intent.
Right.
So, anyway, so in that specific case, I ended up getting 3 years probation. And this is the same thing, arrogance. What a normal person would do is they would say, you know what I'm going to do? And by that point, I'm getting divorced. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I'm losing everything. And what I should have done was said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to claim bankruptcy. I'm going to move in my parents back in my old bedroom. But I was so arrogant that I thought, no, I'm not going to take a step backwards. Keep in mind, I've lost my mortgage company. I've had to sell it. So I sold it to somebody and they're paying me like...
Could they ban you from the business?
Yes.
Yeah, I figured
so they paid me like, this guy's paying me like, I want to say about $8,000 a month. So, which was great, but my bills were outrageous. And I was making so much more money at that time, $8,000 just wasn't going to cover it. And so I should have, to me, I should have claimed bankruptcy. I should have moved into my parents, to my old spare room or my old bedroom, and just started my life over. But I was too embarrassed and humiliated, and I didn't want my dad to think I was, a loser, and which is pretty much what he thought I was my whole life anyway. So You know, it was the first time he was proud of me. Like, I'm running a mortgage company. I got all these guys. I'm making money. My son's got millions of dollars in property. Then, of course, I get in trouble. So I didn't want to do that.
Let me ask you, was part of what you did, your motivation really to please your dad?
Oh,
Look good in his eyes?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. At the time, I would have never told you that. I would have told you, oh, well, I needed the money. And that's great. It sounds good, right? But then you get $100,000. And then you get $300,000. Okay, well, you've got the money. You've got more than enough money now. Mm-hmm. And then it's $500,000. And then it's $750,000. And then why are you still stealing if it's about the money? Because it's not about the money. It's me wanting to be smart and get over on everybody and let everybody know how cool I am and what a big shot I am. And my dad thinks I'm this, you know, rainmaker. He's making tons of money and yeah, absolutely. So I definitely wanted to please my father. You know, my dad was very successful, right? And
why did he think you were a loser to begin with?
well, first of all, I have a learning disability, so he had to pay to put me into schools for kids with learning disabilities. Mm-hmm. My father was like 5'10", you know, was an athletic kid. I wasn't. Mm-hmm. I'm 5'6". I'm not extremely athletic, and I'm not doing well in school. And so, you know, he's looking at me like he felt he deserved a better son. You know,
did he make you know that?
Oh yeah, there's those little subtle comments. Look, when I went to college, first I tried to get a business degree, you know, so that wasn't going to happen. I think I got a C in like accounting 1. I thought, well, I'm never going to pass anything if I can't pass this, and you know, I'll never get micro and macroeconomics and accounting 2 and 3. Like that's never going to happen. So I'll never pass those classes. So I switched it to fine arts, and I remember when I told him, well, I'm going to switch my major to fine arts. He went, yeah, that sounds right, because I can paint and draw and I'm artistic. So, and he said, that's a good degree. He said, yeah, that's basically going to qualify you to draw caricatures of sweaty tourists at Disney World. Mm. That's a smart move. And you know those little, those little subtle, jerky comments, and he always had those. He was my mom used to call them tongue lashings.
But you loved your dad.
I did, of course. You know,
yeah.
I think you're programmed to.
Right.
You know, but I did. I wanted to make him proud, and so what I did was I didn't do what I should have done. Instead, what I did was I thought, you know what I could do? I'm pretty sure I figured out how to run a scam where the bank doesn't know I ripped them off.
Did anybody tell you your story is in a way like Jordan Belfort?
I mean,
Wolf of Wall Street.
I've heard that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know anything. I really only thing I've ever seen is the movie.
Yeah.
But
well, the way I say it, because again, this is you describing yourself. Young guy, very arrogant. Was motivated by his father, you know, to do what he did. Didn't listen to his father later on when his father told him, "Enough, you're doing great. Stop already."
That's right.
You know,
His dad was I remember in the movie.
Yeah, in the movie, and that was true. By the way, I know people that know Jordan. But you know, sometimes arrogance and narcissism takes over at a certain point. You know, you say when I was making money, people would come up to me and said, "Michael, why don't you stop? You got all this money and this and that." And I said, "You know what? You get as much time for $1 million as you do for $1 billion, so I may as well just keep going." That was my head at the time.
Yeah. Not true.
No. That's what I thought about. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, what I did was I figured out how to get, like the short version is, I figured out how to get Social Security to issue me Social Security numbers to children that don't exist. So I would make a fake birth certificate, a fake shot record, and I would go into Social Security and I would say, "Hey, my son was born, you know, with a midwife, and I never had a Social Security number issued." And they go, "Oh, well, let me see. What's his name? What's your name?" And they pull it up and they look and they go, "Oh, wow!" And they look at punch in the information on the birth certificate and they go, "Oh, you're right. He doesn't have one." Well, hold on. They'd hand it back. They go, "Within the next couple of weeks, you'll get one in the mail." Okay. So I get it in the mail, and then I would go and I'd apply online for credit cards. I get turned down, of course, but that creates a credit profile. Mm-hmm. So then I would turn around and I would apply for secured credit cards. So I get 3 secured credit cards, and I just make the payments. And then in 6 months, they would have 710 credit score, 705, 716 or whatever. And you only needed a 610 to get a bank loan if you had all the other met all the other criteria, which of course he's going to meet. Because at this point I've got...
Because you're going to create it.
Yeah, I've got shell companies. I've got, if he needed money in the bank, I've created fake online banks. I mean, it's really just a website. But if you can look it up and it'll bring you, it looks like a website. It's like you're going to SunTrust's website.
Did you create the website too?
Yeah, it's funny because at this time, like now that's easy. But when I did it, GoDaddy had just come out with a platform where they had like 50 templates where you could, it was a big deal. You could create your own website. And so I sat down with a guy and we figured out how to do it. And so I created a couple of those. And then I created the bank statements. And so now, how great is that? I can create the bank statements. I can create a verification of deposit. So if they call the bank, I can verify that he has the money in the bank. If he needs reserves, I can verify the reserves. And if you call on his W-2s and pay stubs, I can answer the phone or have someone answer the phone and call you back from HR to verify that he's been here for 5 years. And so I started creating these fake people, and at that time, a few years earlier, the movie Reservoir Dogs had come out. So I named them like Lee Black, Michael White, James Red, Brandon Green.
After the characters.
After the characters. So it was like silver, blue, which I thought was super, like, very cutesy and funny until you get in front of the judge, and then the judge is like, you prick. And then, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, that was so stupid.
Well, let me ask you this. You said you had a learning disability. This is a large degree of intelligence to think of something like this and then execute it. I mean, you got to be pretty smart to do that.
Right, but I mean, my learning disability, doesn't mean, like a learning disability doesn't mean someone's stupid. It just means they have a difficult time learning.
Comprehending things.
Right, and they don't learn the same way someone else does.
Right.
Most kids with learning disabilities actually have high IQs.
Yeah.
And so what the problem is that I have to, I need somebody to read over my stuff. Like my spelling is horrible. I can't, if I just wrote it out, that's going to be a mistake. Like I'm going to spell some stuff incorrectly.
Right.
So it's really spelling, and of course at that time computers are coming out, so you've got Word and it's underlining things, and then I'm having other people read this, let me know what you think. What is that? You see anything wrong with it? No.
Let me ask you this. This is fascinating to me too. You have this degree of intelligence, you understand, you're going to create this whole world for yourself that's fraudulent. What is it in you or in anybody that has that ability that at that point in time, rather than do something the right way and put their efforts into a real business that you probably could have did well in because you have a good mind in that regard, what do you think is in all of us, not all of us, but those that go that route, that makes us decide, okay, we're going to go this way. I'm not going to do it the right way. I'd rather do it this way.
Right.
Or what is it inside of us? What do you think that is?
I mean, one, I think that, the short answer is it's just arrogance. And, I think that most criminals or criminal-minded people love the idea of getting over, on the system. And also, let's say I'd started a business. Let's say I started selling, I always go with used cars for some reason. But let's say I started selling used cars. I mean, I can do this one fraudulent transaction and make $150,000. That's a lot of used cars. I'm not that good. Like nobody's going to be that good. And then you have to build it up. You have to work really hard. And so maybe is it part of it laziness? But I didn't want to wait years to build up a legitimate business. And I also, like I said, it was arrogance. I thought, I'm not going to get caught. I'm too smart to get caught. The only reason I got caught the first time was because somebody told on me. You know what I'm saying? That's what you tell yourself. Well, that's what I told myself anyway. And I think most criminals, after you go to prison, you're surrounded by these guys, all of them. Somebody told on me. Do you think maybe you were committing a crime?
Exactly.
So everybody's
innocent.
Right. So what I did with those synthetic identities was I built them up. And then I went into an area of Tampa called Ybor City, which is lower. It was being revitalized, and I went into lower income people or housing, lower middle class. So the houses, which is so funny because the same types of houses I was selling then are selling for $350,000, $450,000 now. But back then I could go and I could buy a house for $50,000. Now it needed work, so it needs $25,000 worth of work. Well, I would go in and I would paint the outside, clean it up, trim the trees, mow the yard, do just really exterior work. And I would have an appraiser come out and do an appraisal. Even though the inside was typically trashed, he did so many appraisals for me and my former company, they would fudge the appraisal, right? And eventually what I did was I just got the software myself, and I would do the appraisals myself. But at this point, I wasn't quite there yet. And so I went into Ybor City, and I'm buying houses for like 50, 60 grand, maybe 40 grand. So James Red buys a house for 40 grand. We put 10,000, 15,000 in it. But when I buy the house, I record the value of the house or the sale of the house. Even though I bought it for 40, I record the sale of the house at $200,000. And so if you buy a house for, let's say, $100,000, you pay $700 in doc stamps to record it. And that's how the public records knows this house sold for $100,000. So if I buy a house for 50, I'm paying about $350 in doc stamps. All I did was I just paid the extra $1,050
To verify the sale at that number.
at $200,000. So in public records, if you go to look, it sold for, this guy bought this house for $200,000.
Right.
Now, appraisals work like this. If you were to get an appraisal on your house, they're going to look at all the other houses in the area that sold within the last year and try and go within half a mile up to a mile. And that's how they'll look at the square footage when the house was built, that whole thing, try and find something similar. And then they'll come up with a value of the house. And so these houses, I didn't buy one house. I went and I bought this one for 50 and recorded it at 200. This one I bought for 40 and recorded it at 210. This one for 220. This one for 180, 170. Cleaned it up a little bit, called the appraiser. He comes out, he looks at it and gives me an appraisal. And even if the bank reviewed it and said, yeah, we're going to do a desktop review, or we're going to send somebody out to look at it ourselves, but they're not going to come in. They call it a drive-by. Right. They're going to go by. They're going to drive by. Yeah, it looks fine. All the comparables sold. That one right there, 200, even though I bought it for 50. And they say, yeah, this house is worth 210. So then I refinance the house for 90%, let's say, get a loan for $188,000. I've got 50 in the house, maybe 50 or 60. And I make 3 or 4 payments on the house, and then I let it go into foreclosure. But each guy would buy 5 or 6 houses. So each guy borrows $1 million, $1.2 million, and I've only got 200, 300,000. So each guy's making $600, $700, maybe $800,000. We make a few payments, and then we stop paying. And then the bank would start sending some letters. That you go into collections. And then once it got to collections, after a few months, I would write a letter from my fictitious borrower, my synthetic borrower. I'd write a letter from his sister, his hypothetical sister, and saying that he had been in a car accident. He was life flighted to Tampa General Hospital, currently in a coma, and the doctor said even if he wakes up, he'll never work again. And then I would get an article. Back then, obviously, papers were, there was a newspaper. I retyped an entire newspaper and would put my guy in it. So there's a 17-car pileup, and I stick my guy, and they would say like someone was life flighted. I'd say Brandon Green was life flighted too, and then I'd highlight it and I'd print it out and I'd send it with the letter. And you just never heard anything. Like they just wanted a reason to understand why isn't he paying?
Right.
And to them, this is legit. The guy's got 700 and something credit scores. He's got a bunch of real estate. He's got some credit cards. And then suddenly, and of course I would also, by that point, I've got normal credit cards for $20,000. I'd then go and I'd I'd also go get personal loans for $15,000 from 2 or 3 banks at the same time. That's another 45 grand. So, I mean, I maxed it out. I made the payments. They're like, he was paying. Something happened. If he called his work, they would say he no longer works here. But they're still open. Mm-hmm. You know, you can keep calling for a year and a half. You can keep calling. This is all real. If it's a scam, then when you call that number, disconnected. This number, disconnected. Right. The bank website's not there anymore. But no, I'm maintaining everything because I've got a line of guys doing this. You know, this guy closes, we close him out, make $500,000-$600,000, whatever it is, and then we go to the next guy, and then the next guy. And what happens is that area,
easy chain of people.
Right. And what happens is the whole area shoots up through the roof. So the median price range in that area was about, I'm going to say, $100,000. Forbes listed that the Ybor City zip code, which was 33605, they listed it as one of the top, one of the top 20 fastest growing zip codes, appraising zip codes in the nation. And I had done, I think the FBI said I did like 109 houses or
so
something.
Single-handedly, you raised the...
Right, to about two, I'm sorry, I raised it from like 100 to like $200,000, $350,000.
So now you're doing this all yourself? Or you had
I've got friends helping me. I've got, everybody wants to get in on it.
So you had exposure immediately from other people knowing what you were doing.
Right. And, and I'm, like I said, it's no good. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but in reality, just because of my, my arrogance or narcissism or whatever you want to call it, it's no good if I've got all this money, I'm doing all these really, what I thought was just brilliant scams, if I can't brag. Yeah. Which is, and it's stupid. Like you're going to get caught. Mm-hmm. But at the time I thought, I'm not going to get caught. The banks can't catch, nobody understands what's going on. Not thinking that all these people know about it. I ended up having a girlfriend. So this went on for 18 months. We borrowed like $11.5 million. And a girl I was dating named Allison she's like, look, I want to get it. She was getting a divorce. We're dating and she wants to get in on it. I was like, okay, like I got her an apartment, I bought her a bunch of furniture and stuff. She's like, yeah, but that wasn't enough. So it's like, look, let me just get you an apartment. Let me get you some furniture. Let me this, I'm trying to give her some money. Here's a little bit here, 1,000 here, 1,000, but it's not enough. It's like, she's looking at me like, you're driving an Audi. You got all these apartments. You're doing great. Like, what are you doing? Like, you've been getting away with this forever. Like, I want to do this. Mm-hmm. So I end up setting up a scam for her. And the short version is we make a fake ID because I could make fake IDs at this point. This was before, eventually what I ended up doing is I just ended up going into the DMV and getting them to give me an ID in somebody else's name. And I'll explain that. But at this point, I didn't do that. I just took her ID. I had her go dye her hair black. Gosh. So we used the name Rosita Perez. And she
so good girlfriend.
That's common. I thought that's a very common
Better
name.
Check her out.
So Allison goes. We rented a house. I take the deed out of the owner's name and stick it in Rosita Perez's, and I satisfy the mortgage on the house. Mm-hmm. So I was also running the same scam with a buddy of mine in Orlando. So he's borrowed $500,000 at this point. So I'm running multiple scams. And so as Rosita Perez, we were refinancing that house 3 times. We're getting 3 first mortgages because this is straight. Like I know the banks, they're going to come looking. But I thought, why am I going to buy all these houses? I could get $1 million. And so she goes into a closing, but the day before she goes into closing, she changes her hair to brown hair with like blondish kind of streaks, highlights. And, she's straight Midwestern, right? She's got fair skin, blue eyes. And when she goes in, she gives him the Rosita Perez, and she does not look anything like a Rosita Perez. But it is her, though.
Yeah.
The photo is her. Mm-hmm. So I told her not to, like, she just showed up and said, what are you doing?
You could have waited 2 or 3 weeks. What do you do? She's like, oh, it wasn't me. That's a point. It wasn't you. Well, they'll have the photo. It's still me. It looks like me. I'm like, it kind of. There was no way for me to know that when she went in, she signs the documents, the title person was like, this doesn't look like you. And she's like, no, it's me. And she's like, no, this does. But it was her.
Yeah.
So, otherwise I wouldn't have let her go in if I thought. But it did look like her. It just happened that this woman, it just doesn't look like you. She goes, you know what? I'm going to make some phone calls. I'm not going to give you the check. Wow. I'm going to wait. I'll let you know. And we'd already done one closing and got a check for like $100,000. This was the second closing. We were doing it 3 times. She wouldn't give her the check. The other checks were like 115 or something. So she gets in the car. She tells me, I said, oh, we're done. We're done. What do you mean? I said, no, we're done. We're not going to the other closing. No, we got no, we're done. And she was like, well, what about this check? I said, no, that check's done. It's burnt. We'll start over. No, I don't want to start over. Like she's close to getting, and just those loans alone, she's going to get like $150,000. So she's thinking, she's ecstatic. And I'm saying, no, it's over. We're walking away, walk away. And it's easy for me to say walk away. I've got $500,000 sitting in the bank and I own a ton of real estate and everything's paid for. And so, and anyway, she went on and I said, she ended up saying, look, how about we give this check to your buddy, to Travis, who's running the same type of scam in Orlando. I said no, and she goes, at least call him. So I called Travis. I explained what happened with Travis. And Travis said, what do you think? I said, I think it's burnt. I think they're going to figure it out, and I don't want to go back, and I wouldn't do it. He's like, it's fine. I'll do it. Okay. So, and he ends up depositing the check. 3, 4, then they said, they have to hold it back. Then they held the funds,
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever, a week later, 5 days later, whatever it was, I call him and I said, hey man, I said, Allison's bugging me. What's going on with the check? And he said, oh yeah, listen, he said, the bank manager called me and said he needed to witness my signature on the endorsement. So I said, that doesn't sound right.
No.
And I said, Travis, I've deposited lots of checks for well over 100,000. That doesn't make sense at all. He's, well, because it's an endorsement because it's in somebody else's name. I said, it doesn't matter. I've been depositing checks in the names of all kinds of different people. Now something's wrong. Remember he said, you're shaking like a little girl, bro. It's fine. He goes, I'm here at the bank right now. I'm pulling in. I go, the cops are going to be waiting for you. He goes, there's no cops here. I said, they're not going to be in police cars. They're going to be in undercover cars. What are you doing? And he just, laughed it off, hung up the phone, got arrested, walked in. They grab him. And he got grabbed. And I remember I called the cell phone later. He wouldn't answer. And finally I called his other cell phone and a police officer answered, detective. Who is this? And so I was like, hung up the phone. I got him a lawyer.
What about the girl? Nothing happened with her yet?
No, nothing happened. She's fine. She's freaking out. We're freaking out. But I was, once again, I thought, now Travis and I
grew up and, we were pretty much best friends growing up. And I kind of felt like, I don't think he's going to say anything, like it's a minor case. It's they don't really know what's going on. It's $300,000 and it was state. Mm-hmm. So I thought I can pay that money back. It's only like $300,000 or $400,000 that he pulled out of the bank. I can pay that back. I got him a lawyer. He said, don't worry, I'm not going to say anything. The lawyer said at most I might have to go to jail for 6 months. He's like, as long as you, take care of me. And I was like, yeah, no problem. And, what actually happened was the lawyer said, you need to cooperate against this guy right here. And he started working with with a task force. They put together a task force with him. And it wasn't hard to put together. He said, this guy is currently on probation for fraud. He's running a scam. Well, how can you prove that? Pull up public records. Look at this guy, James Red. 5 houses were bought, all in foreclosure. Look at this guy, Brandon Green. 5 houses, green, black, white, silver. I just laid it out. At that point, they were like, oh yeah, this is clearly a scam. And he explained what I had done. So it doesn't take them much to go, yeah, you're right. This is a shitty area that sells for about $50,000 to $100,000. These houses are all going for $200,000, $250,000. Pretty clear. Something's wrong. Yeah. So they start working with him. And then what happens is, it's funny because the title companies start getting subpoenaed. And so I've got people that I know that are at title companies. I had dated a girl at a title company. And she calls me one day and she said, look, we're not supposed to tell you this. we were told not to tell you this, but we were our records were subpoenaed, and they were all your files.
Yeah, that's when you know everything's falling
Yeah.
apart.
And then I have buddies of mine who are like coming in and saying, look, I got to talk to you. And I go, what's up? This guy, Jeff Testerman, just called me from the St. Petersburg Times and asking questions about Brandon Green, Lee Black. And I was like, holy shit. He said, I told him I don't know what you're talking about. I hung up the phone. Well, what he actually said was, well, I never met any of those guys. He says, well, that doesn't surprise me since they don't exist. And he just hung up, came straight to my house. And I still kept thinking, I didn't go into any of those titles, those closings. I would get the title company to give me the file, and I would make a copy of a driver's license with somebody's picture on it, and I would put it on the file, and I'd get the checks, I'd sign the guy's name and bring it back. Like I'd say, hey, I'm going to pick up the file, I'm going to bring it to the guy. Mm-hmm. And they knew me because I'd been in the industry for years using these title companies, so they're like, yeah, sure, Matt, no problem. Then I would sign for them, I'd come back, give them the file, and they'd notarize it. So what are they going to say? Oh, I notarized all these fake documents? No, they're going to say, this guy, Lee Black, came in signed the document. I saw him. That's his driver's license. So I thought, I might be okay. And then one day, a friend of mine who's a sheriff's deputy, and it's funny because I've done fraudulent loans for lawyers, doctors, and I had done a bunch for this sheriff's deputy and his wife, a couple million for the two of them. Him in particular, probably about $1 million. He comes in one day and he goes, and he had been divorced, and he came in one day and he said, hey, I got to talk to you. I was like, what's up? And he said, I used to date this woman, this chick on the Tampa Police Department, and she was a part of a task force. And I went, okay. And he said, the task force was on fraud, and it was on you. And I was like, okay. And he said, they just handed over the task force to the FBI. You're going to be arrested in a couple days. And I was just like, holy shit. And he went, my name came up because he said, you've sold me some properties. And so my name came up. And so she came to his house like in the morning, like 6 in the morning before he went to work, and told him, do not talk to this guy anymore. They're going to grab him. They're going to squeeze him. He's going to talk, and he's going to end up getting you hemmed up. Don't talk to him on the phone anymore. And I was like, okay. And he goes, well, what are you going to do? And I said,
take off.
Yeah, I said, I can't go to prison. I'm adorable. I know what's going to happen. I've seen Shawshank Redemption. Like every movie I've seen, the soft white guy, it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
And I don't know. There's camps and lows, and I don't know anything. And so I was like, oh, I'm leaving. And he goes, well, what am I going to do? And I said, tell me you don't know anything. Like, you're a sheriff's deputy. I applied for a loan. The guy said, this is the loan. I signed for it. Like, I don't know how these things work. This is what the guy said. I said, you'll be fine. And he was fine. So I ended up packing up my bags, and I got out about 80 grand. Like, it's just like a Thursday. Like, I have like one day to get out 80,000 or get out any money I could. So we've got hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you can't get out hundreds of thousands of dollars in a day. Right. So I ended up getting about 80 grand.
Did they have ATM codes back then?
They had yeah. But even then, it's like a $300 limit, you know, like, and I don't even know that some of these bank accounts I even had the ATMs. Right. I do remember what upset me was I had like 30 or 40,000 in student loans that I'd just written the checks for, and I raced to the bank and thought, take out the money before the night before, they'd gone out. They'd all, so while I was packing my bags, this girl that I'd been dating a month or two, not even two, I'm not even going to say, I say I've been dating her a month to six weeks, and she's like, we were dating 2 months. So, you know, she's always upset. So she comes in, and I'm packing my bags. And I'm like, what's going on? I hadn't been answering her phone all day. And she said, what are you doing? And I was like, look, I'm leaving. Here's what happened. I explained the whole thing. She already knew I was on federal probation. And so she said, I want to come with you. And I went, oh, we don't even really know each other.
It's Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, we don't really know each other. And she's like, I'm in love with you. And I'm like, look, I don't know that, no offense, like, you're great, but I don't know that this is ever going to be love for me. And she's like, I don't care. I'm like, well, what if it doesn't work out? You can't be on the run with me if it doesn't. She goes, look, I remember she actually gave a great impassioned speech about Because I thought she's this sweet, innocent girl. And she gives me this speech. She's like, you don't really know me. She's like, I've been pinching pennies my whole life. I shop with coupons. I'm broke. I've never had any money. She's like, she worked at the dog track. And she said, but she used to work in Vegas. She said, you don't even know why I'm in Florida. She said, I worked in Vegas for a lawyer that represented casino interests. He sent me down here because he found out she'd embezzled I forget, it was like 10 grand or something because she had a gambling habit. So she had embezzled money. He didn't call the police because she was sleeping with him and he didn't want his wife to find out. So he got her a job in Tampa in the dog track. She said, that's the only reason I'm here. And I remember she was like, and I remember thinking, so you're and she'd been divorced like 3 times. I was like, so you're a lying, thieving adulteress. And I thought, like, that's a pretty good resume. Like, that's the person I probably do need to bring with me. Before this sweet, innocent girl, she'll never hold up, but you're a lunatic. So we pack our bags. I ran up all my credit cards. I remember I was charged up like $20,000 or $30,000 to American Express. You just run everything up, buy everything you can think to spend so that I don't have to cut into this money. I immediately took off. I wrote my parents a letter. I'm sorry, I messed up. Here's what's happening. I'm not going to prison. And I take off, and I have a son. Like I leave my son, and I convince myself his mom's never going to bring him to prison to see me, which is true. She never did. That's not going to happen. And I thought I would rather have him envision me as this romantic character who's on the run with money and, than for him to know that I'm in prison, or get out of prison. And I thought by the time I get out of prison, she's going to be married. He's not going to want anything to do with me. Like, she's that chick that was just said, the divorce was horrible. And we were very friendly, but I didn't have a good feeling about it. And, honestly, I was probably just justifying it. And so I take off and, I wrote her a letter. I wrote my parents a letter. She and I, Rebecca Houck and I go straight to Atlanta. We go to Atlanta and we rent a house. I rent a house in the name Michael Shanahan. So, because that was the owner of the house's name, Michael Shanahan. But I go to Fulton County Public Records and I satisfy the mortgages on the house. So now I'm living in a house as Michael Shanahan. The house is 5 or 6 years old with no mortgages on it. So it looks like I own a $200,000 house that has no mortgages on it. And I call 3 hard money lenders, and each one of them lends me roughly $150,000. So I close all of those loans within a day of each other.
So when they put the,
right, so
the lien on.
So nobody knows. At different title companies. Mm-hmm. So what happens is the title company runs a search on the title. And they go, yeah, Michael Shanahan owns it, and he doesn't owe any mortgages on it. And keep in mind, I've got a new Social Security number. So if you look at Michael Shanahan's Social Security number, no mortgages show up. So it seems legit. Mm-hmm. Like they pulled the real guys, they're going to be like, well, maybe there's none on the title, but he's got a couple mortgages on his credit. This guy has nothing. So those hard money guys come out. They say, yeah, I'll give you $150. I close within a day or so of each other. Some of them I think I close the same day at different title companies. They then mail the documents in, mailing in a first mortgage saying, I'm placing a mortgage on this property, a first mortgage for $150,000. So they cut me the check, so I end up with $450,000, closing costs, whatever. So I get that money, I deposit the money in the banks, and then I start cashing it out. And I was opening up different banks. And keep in mind, remember I told you I was using fake IDs? Mm-hmm. By this point, I started running ads saying, good credit, bad credit, no problem, free applications, home loans available, call now. So people would call, and then I would get their information. And on an application, I just had to ask 2 more questions that are typically asked on a residential loan application, which was, where were you born? What's your mother's maiden name? And now I could seal your identity. You gave me your birth certificate, social security number, your full name. You gave me everything. So by this point, I would order the documents, and so I would order your birth certificate, your your birth certificate, your social security card. I'd register to vote in your name. I would make a fake lease agreement in your name. Keep in mind, we're now in Georgia, so if I'm running the ad in Florida, I can now take that information. I can go into Georgia. I can get a driver's license. But what I really did, I didn't go to Georgia because they asked for a thumbprint. I actually went to Alabama, and I was getting driver's licenses in Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina. So I'm opening bank accounts, dumping the money in the bank accounts.
So let me step. So you did on the road on the lam,
Right.
as a fugitive, the same thing that you were doing prior to that,
Right, but much more...
but differently.
Yeah, because and now I don't care if the banks show up. Like, I don't care if anybody knows it's fraud, because you take out 3 mortgages on a house, they're going to know this is fraud.
Sure.
When they start foreclosing, they're going to say, they think of their first mortgage, they're going to go, well, I think I'm the first mortgage, but there's 2 other mortgages in front of me.
So now you're just getting the money.
Right. So I do that. We get that money. We then go to North Carolina, and I run a scam in South Carolina. And at this point, we decided we needed to get permanent fake IDs, because stealing someone's identity, some of these guys that are calling, when you ask the questions, some of them are like, you're like, do you have a criminal history? And they're like, no, but I had a DUI one time and I lost my license. It's like, well, I can't be driving on your driver's license and get pulled over, and you lost it 2 states over, and I don't know until they're put the handcuffs on me. So I was like, we need people that aren't using their information. And so I remember Becky and I are having this discussion, and she said, like, who? Like mental patients, like prisoners, and we pulled up to a light, and there was a guy holding a "will work for food" sign. I go, like that guy. And I remember she said, I remember she used the word hobo, because nobody says hobo. She was the hobo? And I said, yes. So I dropped her off, walked over. I said, hey, bro. I said, can I ask you some questions? And he was like, yeah. I said, I'll give you $20. Give him $20. Started asking questions. Do you have a driver's license? No. I said, was it suspended? He said, nah, it's like expired. I said, have you ever had a DUI? No. Do you have a criminal record? I just start boom, 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 boom. I gave him another 20 left. He's perfect. So I then made a survey sheet with 17 questions, and I made a little ID that said Salvation Army survey, statistical survey taker. And I clipped it on, and I made a bunch of surveys, and I went out and I started surveying people, homeless people, which takes a long time, because at this point I'm 33 years old. There's not a lot of 33-year-old homeless guys.
Right.
So, white guys. So I go, I was probably 35, I think I was 34 by that point. So I start surveying these guys, and then I order their documents, and then and one of the great things is they'll tell you, that like they don't have passports. So I can get a passport. And these guys, they weren't the people that I thought they were. Most of the reason they were out there it was drugs and mental illness, is what you figure out. And if they had been arrested, it was for like urinating in public or being drunk in public. So it's like, okay, this guy's, he's not going to have warrants out for us.
He qualifies. He meets your standards.
Yes. So, and then I was also able to go into the DMV and get a driver's license in his name. And I'd have to take the driving test. Can't tell you how many driving tests I've taken to get them their license. And then I would buy cars in their name, whatever I wanted, rent an apartment in their name.
And how long were you on the run doing all of this?
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Had you been indicted or
by this point,
were you indicted already?
Yeah, within a few months, I'd been indicted in Florida, and then in Georgia they indicted me right away. And and it was and keep in mind too, it was on the local.
So you had state cases too.
No, this was still
all federal?
but this was the Secret Service was handled it in Atlanta. So I got indictments in the end, I ended up having indictments in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee. But what I did was I continued to commit fraud. I ended up going to where did I go? We were living in Charlotte, North Carolina. Went to Columbus, South Carolina. I bought a couple houses, satisfied the loans on those in the name of a guy named Gary Sullivan. Borrowed $1.3 million on those houses. Pulled out like $700,000, and I got caught in the bank. And I walked into a bank one day. They handcuffed me. They brought me into, an office. They called. I thought it was going to be the FBI, but it ended up being a detective. So the detective comes, and they kept calling me Gary Sullivan.
Were you on the most wanted list?
I was on the Secret Service's most wanted list at that point. And the FBI were looking for me, Secret Service, U.S. Marshals. The detective shows up, and he doesn't realize that I'm not Gary Sullivan. I have an ID, and he's telling me that Wachovia figured out that I had multiple mortgages. I actually had 6 mortgages, but they only caught 3. And I convince him that I haven't done anything wrong, that the bank's loan officers may have done something, but I certainly wouldn't know how to do this. I had a business card that said I worked for a labor company. You can go to the website. You can call my employer. You can check me out. He's already run me through NCIC. So Wachovia is screaming and hollering for him to arrest me, and I end up convincing him that I think the bank fucked up. And he ends up saying, yeah. And what ended up being the problem was that the guy from Wachovia ended up saying, look, this guy's using a fake ID. It starts with 000, but in South Carolina, their IDs start with 000. So I'm like, oh, now I'm not Gary Sullivan? Bro, what are we doing? And he's like, I know. And so the guy lost credibility because it was a real ID. So I end up following the police officer back to the police station. I fill out a police report, and he lets me go. I go to a couple more banks, pull out some more money. Then Becky and I immediately move. We go to Houston, Texas. We get into a huge argument. We split up the money. When I say split up the money, I mean I walked away with $100,000. She walked away with $500,000 or $600,000. And so I go back to Charlotte. By the time I get back to Charlotte to pick up my car, because I was driving a U-Haul truck, because I moved my whole apartment there, the U.S. Marshals are waiting for me. So I almost get caught in a Starbucks, and they chase my car. Somebody recognizes me because they were actually interviewing across the street. They were interviewing the people at my apartment complex. So one of the employees recognizes me. She runs out the back, gets them. I don't know this is happening. I did see her leave, but I get my coffee. I get in my car, start my car, and as I'm starting my car, they come running at my car. And there's a guy who's screaming, he's here, and I take off. I then go to Nashville, and I start the whole scam over again. I bought a bunch of houses. I borrowed $3.5 million in Nashville, and when I was in Nashville, that's where I get caught. I'm in Nashville. I'm dating this girl. I borrowed about $3.5 million. Dateline, NBC News was coming out. They were doing a 1-hour special on me. By this point, I've been in Fortune magazine, Bloomberg Business Week. I've had over 50 or 60 articles written about me. And we were planning on leaving the United States. We were pulling money out.
When you say these articles, were they bad articles that you were...
Oh, yeah, they're horrible.
All hard ones.
Yeah, they're all they're calling us the Bonnie and Clyde of bank fraud. They're calling us, serial signers. And I remember the first time I read where they described me as a con man, I was super offended. You just don't see yourself how you really are. Yeah. And anyway, yeah, I come home one day, and what had happened was we were pulling cash out, and we're planning on leaving the United States. We're going to go to Australia. Because Australia, I have a fake passport, but it's good. Like, the guy's got no criminal history. I can go to Australia as this person. If you showed up at that time to Australia with like $200,000 or something, I don't know the exact amount, but it was like $200,000 and a business plan, you could become a permanent resident alien. And they didn't ask for fingerprints.
Right.
So I'm planning on leaving, and we're pulling out cash, and my girlfriend ended up confiding in a friend of hers who I was. That girl called the Secret Service. They sat on my house for 3 days, and then I pull up one day, and they get on the ground, and throw me on the ground, and that's it. They grabbed me, and I got caught, I dragged back to Atlanta.
Well, you had a good run, I can tell you that. But then, so did you end up taking a plea?
Yeah, I took a plea because I got a public defender. They take all your money.
Yeah.
So, and it's not like I have an argument to get any money. It's all illegal. It's not like I say, oh, I had a job.
Right.
So they take all my money, I get a public defender, and my public defenders, and it sounds bad. She's a super nice person. There was nothing she could do. Like, I'm 100% guilty. Like, I can't go to trial, I can't do anything. She's like, look, if you're guilty and you go to trial, there's a 100% chance you're getting found guilty. If you're not guilty and you go to trial, there's a 50% chance you're found guilty.
Maybe higher than that.
Right. So I can't go. And so she's like, look, cooperate. Like, everybody's already cooperated against you. You're gonna end up with whatever, 20 years or something, if you don't cooperate. And so they asked me to be interviewed by Dateline. They'd already come out with a 1 hour special, but they wanted to interview me now and recut it. Mm-hmm. So I cooperate with the FBI and Secret Service. I meet with them, I explain everything that's happened. It's been 3 years, they've never done anything. All the people that were involved with me in Tampa, they never indicted anybody. Those people have already cooperated against me. And so, I meet with them, yes, this happened, no, that didn't happen, yes, so-and-so was involved, So we go through that, FBI for 4 or 5 days, Secret Service for like 3 days. Then I'm interviewed by Dateline. And months go by, and my sentencing is coming up, but nobody's ever indicted. I'm sorry, nobody's ever indicted, arrested, nothing. So I get my PSI, and it says 26. The first one said 32 years to life.
PSI is pre-sentence report.
Right. The second one said, after I argued about it, like, I might as well go to trial. And so they came back, and it ended up being 26 years and 4 months. 360.
New law, obviously. There was no parole.
Yeah, no parole.
Yeah.
So my lawyer, of course, said it's not a big deal. We're going to argue in front of the judge. We're going to get some of these enhancements knocked off. And we went. So I went to trial. I went to sentencing, and she argued, and the judge was like, no, I disagree. I'm not going to knock. No. And I got 26 years and 4 months. And then that was a bad day.
Yeah.
That was a bad day. Cry, like, I love to tell you, I was a tough guy. Like, I cried like a baby, like a small child. You've never seen anybody so just like couldn't breathe, just like I couldn't imagine that I'd done anything to get 26 years.
A long time.
Yeah, like I hadn't harmed anybody.
Yeah.
I guess financially, I guess I harmed
Matthew,
people.
In the federal system, you get more time for a financial crime or fraud than you would for murder, practically. Trust me. They want to kill you for financial crimes or fraud. But let me ask you this. I'm not going to go into the prison stuff now, but I think we're going to do a part 2 because you ended up doing what, 13 years, something like
Yes.
that. Okay. But I want to get to what you're doing now. Just your whole mindset now. Let me ask you this: would you ever go back and commit another fraud? Honestly.
I know what the right thing to say is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I honestly, when I got out of prison, like, I figured I'm going to give it a year. Mm-hmm. I'll give it a year, and if nothing's happening, and I even told my probation officer, because she was like, look, last time you were on probation, you sold $11.5 million. That's not happening this time. I went, And she goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, let's see. I said, I'm going to give it a year. I said, I'm going to bust my ass for a year, and if in a year from now I'm riding the bus and I can't pay my bills and I'm living in someone's spare room, I said, I'm going to commit a massive, massive fraud, and I'm going to leave the United States because that's where I fucked up last time. Mm-hmm. And she was like, okay, well, I remember she said, I'm not that shocked by that. Mm-hmm. She said, let's hope that doesn't happen. I said, yeah, let's hope that things work out. And, now, but they did work out.
How long are you out of prison?
Coming up on 5 years. I'll be off probation in about 4 or 5 more months. And I think that prison reset my values. Does that make, what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And, even though I'm saying I made that arrogant comment, I just remember thinking, like, just before I got out of prison, I kept telling myself, like, you're gonna be humble, you're gonna be appreciative, you're gonna live in someone's spare room, you're gonna work at McDonald's, and you're gonna be okay with that. Because one of the things that I figured out, going to prison, was that I was doing all of these things to make a bunch of money, And I was surrounding myself by all these people that I was trying to impress, and they weren't my friends. You're hanging out with me because I'm making you money. You know, you're making 500,000, you're making 200, you're making 50 on this deal and 40 on that one, but we're not friends. The moment things went south, you know, you turned on me, and I'm okay with that. Like, my best friend turned on me, but my best friend had a daughter he was taking care of that he's responsible for. So I'm secondary to that. Like, he's not gonna let her go into foster care to protect some scumbag, you know, his buddy who's ripping people off. Like, I get it. Like, that's who his family's first. I understand that. So, you know, I just realized that all of these people weren't my friends, and I had tons of money, and I was miserable. I'm taking Xanax because I'm having panic attacks. I'm not happy. And when I went to prison, I was happier in prison with nothing than I was with all the money in the world. And the people that were my friends in prison didn't want anything from me. And I'd never experienced that before.
You know, it's funny you say that. Mike Tyson, who's a friend, told me that the best time of his life was the time he spent in prison. Nobody bothered him. He didn't have to deal with anything. He enjoyed the alone time. Best time of his life. I can't say the same. I did 8 years. It wasn't the best time of my life. I didn't enjoy it because I had a wife and children.
Yeah, that's definitely the difference. That's the difference.
Much different. When guys have no family and nothing they have to worry about on the outside, they do the best time.
Yeah. I knew a guy that even told me that. He broke up with his fiancée.
Yeah.
She's writing him every day, sending pictures every day, and he'd get them, he'd read them, and he'd throw them away. And I was like, why? What's with this chick? What's going on? He's like, He said, I did 5 years about 10 years ago. He said, my time will go easier he goes, I don't want to be that guy on the phone on Saturday morning screaming, why didn't you answer the phone? I called 5 times, where were you? He said, I don't want to do that. He said, so I told her, look, you go out, maybe you find somebody, maybe you get married, and if in 3 years when I get out, well, then we'll see what happens.
You do the hardest time when you're worrying about everybody on the outside. No doubt about it.
And what a one-sided relationship. Like I'm a selfish enough prick without being the guy that's in prison saying, oh, look this up on the internet and mail that to me. Oh, get me this book. Oh, call my buddy Jimmy's girlfriend and tell her that. Like, come on, man. Like, what a horrible relationship to have. It's totally one-sided. I can't do anything for you. I'm a burden every time I call.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I went, when I got to prison, and, you know, I wrote a memoir, and I started writing other guys' true crime stories. And that really opened my eyes because I'm a creative person. I like writing. I didn't really know how much I liked writing until I got locked up. But, you know, your expectations of life drop dramatically. Like, those first 6 months are horrible. But when you get down to that, you know, low point, you start enjoying the little things. You know what I'm saying? The sun on your face, walking the track, you know, things that you never would have been. Reading a good book. And so starting writing these guys' story gave me purpose. And my time started flying by. And yeah, I'm friends with all these guys now. Like, guys are getting out, and I'm friends with them now.
What are you doing now? I saw you on, you did a commercial for, was it a...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you did a good job, by the way.
I used to wake up, you know, on Saturday mornings, I would wake up early, and I'd go in the TV room, and were you ever at a low?
No. Well, no, I was at a camp for
Oh,
a couple of months. Yeah.
Well, they have
And then
TV
they took
rooms,
me
right?
out.
Don't they have TV? Do they have TV rooms? Like, it's
Yeah.
maybe a room twice this big, or this big, or maybe twice.
Yeah, even the mediums had TV rooms, yeah.
Right. So, well, the medium I was at, because I first went to the medium at Coleman for 3 years. They didn't have it was just mounted up on the wall in the big room. So in the low, they have TV rooms, and like every prison's different, obviously. But I would go in the TV room, and I used to watch the home title lock commercial, and I used to notice they're interviewing a lawyer, they're interviewing an ex-FBI or retired FBI agent, they're interviewing a cyber guy, and then when it gets to the guy who's stealing the titles, it's some faceless guy with a hood. Mm-hmm. And I thought, they can't find anybody. Because when you're locked up, all the con men are trying to figure out how to change their name, bury the information that's on online.
Right.
They're basically, to me, I used to say, you're just working on your next
Exactly.
indictment. And I remember saying, they were like, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to lean into it. I said, lying is what got me here. I said, I'm never fucking doing it again. I said, and if it comes up, I'm not saying I'm going to walk up, shake somebody's hand and say, hey, I just got out of prison. I said, but if it comes up, I'm not going to deny it. I said, if I feel like I'm evading it, I'm going to make sure and address it head on and say, hey, bro, oh yeah, well, yeah, I didn't see that movie because I was locked up at that time. And, oh, you were locked up? Yeah, I did 13 years. Like, I'm just going to say it. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what's great about that? That will separate those people. I said, there will quickly become two kinds of people in my life. Those people that are 100% acceptant of the person I was and the person I am today, and those people that can go fuck themselves. I said, and I'd rather have that guy in my life than the person that's embarrassed. I went on a date one time, and I remember the girl halfway through the date I said something about, oh yeah, well, no, because I was locked up at that time. And she went, oh gosh, she goes, can we not mention that you were locked up? And I went, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I mean, like, if we go to a party or you meet my family or anything, I don't want to mention that. And I went, yeah, no. I said, and I gave her the whole, there's two kinds of people, boom and boom. And I said, so you're either acceptant of it or you're not. And she goes, well, I don't think I am. I said, well, it's not going to work out, and I'm sorry, and I hope you find somebody else. Can I get the check? Mm-hmm. And that was it. And that was great. I didn't have to spend 6 months to find that out. You know?
Yeah,
So
I like that.
yeah, I mean, it's just, it's great.
So would you consider your life turned around at this point? Your mentality is different. You're not going to get engaged. Well, you're not going to engage in criminal conduct, or is that time limit up yet?
No, I've look.
Been through that.
I don't want to jinx myself, you know. But I definitely feel that. Absolutely, I feel that way. And I feel that my mind is. I'm in a better place. First of all, my wife would kill me. I mean, if I even joke about it, I get the look, and I'm like, no, I'm just playing. I know you're playing. I'm like, I know I am playing. So my wife is probably, I'm more scared of my wife than pretty much anybody.
Well, you know what, I want to ask you if this matches up. I say this all the time. You know, my big mark was the government. I defrauded the government. I had a lot of money. And I say this today, I don't have a moral issue with defrauding the government out of money. I don't have a moral issue with that, because everything that's legal, illegal rather, is not necessarily immoral. Just because the government says, hey, you can't do that and we're creating a law, doesn't mean it's immoral. But, so I have no problem with doing that, because I believe the government, and many times they rob us, they fraudulently use our money, they enrich themselves with it. If any private company would operate like the government, everybody would go to jail.
Yeah.
Every single one of them, you know that. But I won't do it, because same thing, my wife would forget it. It would be all over. She would, after what I put her through the first time, and I don't want to go back to jail. But morally, I don't have a problem with it.
Right.
So in that regard, and I'm not saying other things, but the government, I don't have a problem with it.
Oh yeah.
But again, we have to put a barrier in front of ourselves, so you're not going to do that, because you're not going to suffer those consequences and put your family through that again.
Well, I mean, look at all of Congress. Like, you're getting paid $150,000. 10 years later, you're worth $14 million because of they're doing insider trading.
Exactly.
There's so many.
They exempt themselves from things we would go to jail for. No doubt.
It's not, like I said, it's definitely not, I don't have a moral issue with it, or an issue with it in general. But yeah, I don't, look, the government can't take the money that I'm making right now away. Mm-hmm. So that's great.
Well, you're doing great. I mean, you got a big YouTube platform now. You've been telling your story everywhere, so I think you're in demand in certain places. And are you using any of your past experience to educate people how not to get involved in a fraud?
Yeah, I mean, I do. So it's funny, like the same banks that I ripped off, I do speaking engagements. They'll fly me out, or I'll do cyber conventions, and they fly me out and they pay me to do keynote speaking. I speak in front of law enforcement. I'll speak in front of, I can't even say like Hillsborough County, because actually all the counties came together on 2 separate occasions and had me come in and do like an hour and a half presentation for title fraud, because it's becoming a huge issue.
Huge issue.
And
I'm going to say there's real value in what you know.
yeah, and the same thing with Home Title Lock. Like actually my booking agent reached out to them and they were like, they researched me and came back and said, my God, when I did the commercial, they were like, you understand what, we've been looking for someone like you for 10 years. And
Well, I'll tell you, it's a great commercial and you presented yourself really well there. So, I mean, I can see value in
New
that.
Cambridge.
Yeah. Well, Frank Abagnale now has a career.
Right.
You know how he's working. Jordan Belfort, although he's still pretty arrogant. Same thing with Jordan. He's educated people as to what not to do. And to a degree myself, I mean, I've spoken in front of law enforcement and over the years, security agencies and things like that, just to tell them what to watch out for with organized crime. So, I mean, if you're using your past experiences to now do the right thing and educate people not to get caught up in a mess like that, it's a good thing.
Yeah. No, I mean, it definitely feels good. I would love to say that I would love to sit here and say that that was part of my plan in prison. Like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to.
Yeah.
But it just getting out and working hard and writing and just trying to be a decent human being. Like, these doors just they open and open and open. It's like I'm not trying to do that. And then I get these emails and comments from people saying that my story's inspiring and you're inspirational. And it's like, and I would just kind of go, like, I'm not trying to be inspirational.
No, it feels good.
But it's just happening.
Yeah.
Like, I never say anything to be inspirational, but they look at me, they look at my story, they look at what's happening, and people say, wow, man, this is inspiring.
Yeah, that's good. Same thing, when I got out of prison, I was just determined to get back on my feet. I never even thought of speaking or anything else, it just happened, but it feels good.
Yeah.
And people are being inspired and motivated, it feels good. So hopefully you'll stay on that track. I think I have a 25-year track record in that regard now, so it works.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Well, I'm amazed that I make a living on YouTube. Like, there was no YouTube. There was no YouTube. I've never seen an iPhone. Like, the way I'm making a living didn't exist when I went into prison. And so doing a podcast and the fact that I interview like 4 criminals, or sometimes FBI agents or former FBI, CIA, I interview those guys and I put it on my YouTube channel and it pays all my bills. Like, that's insane.
I know.
That's, and it's like such an easy job. Yeah. I just have to shoot the shit with my friend, with people that I know, or these guys, just like I was for 13 years in prison.
Yeah.
Not a lot's changed.
No.
The food's better.
A lot better. Yeah, I sat with a CIA agent, an ex-CIA agent recently, and I was fascinated by the stories, that she had to tell, the things that she was saying. And, I can't say I'm making a living out of it, but I'm not complaining either. YouTube it's a good resource. Let's put it that way. So, but who would have thought?
Yeah.
I was so reluctant to get on YouTube. When the pandemic hit and I had, 40 some odd speaking dates canceled, my team called me up, what are you going to do? I said, nothing. I'm going to stay home. I haven't been home like this in years. It's great. No, you got to get on YouTube. I resisted for about 2 months, and then finally we did it. And now it's become something, it's part of what we do. Everything else. So it's a good platform. It really is. But anyway, listen, I wish you the best. Maybe we'll do a part 2 one time. We'll go over all the prison, because 13 years in prison, you got some stories, without a doubt. And I think we know some mutual people. We probably, people that have crossed both of our paths, and we'll get into it. But this was great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I'll probably be in Los Angeles again in a month or 2 or so.
You call me up, we'll do it then.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks
a lot. So there you have it. I'd be honest with you, I could have spent a couple of more hours with him, and Matthew he's pretty detailed in telling us what he did, as you can see. We didn't get into his 13 years in prison. He met a couple of guys that I know now. We may do a part 2 on that. We'll get into that at some point in time. But once again, I hope you listen and all the scams that he was able to pull off, on banks, on insurance companies, on the DMV, on the police, and on the federal government for quite some time. There are people out there that you just got to watch out for. Matt was one of them. He admits it. I was one of them at one time. That's how it is. But I hope you got something out of this, and I hope you enjoyed it. And hey, we never glorify crime. We never advocate crime. It's not what I do anymore, and I think you know that. And hopefully you enjoyed his story, because I know you enjoy the stories here, and you get a little bit educated as to how crafty some of these people on the street can be. Gotta watch it. And I said to Matt, you know, you're a pretty smart guy. If you would put your efforts into something legitimate, you probably would have done great. Well, that's what he's doing now. So I root for him. You know, everybody deserves a second chance. I certainly got one. So I hope you enjoyed it. How do I always leave you? The very same way. Be safe. Please be safe. Ladies, you know how I preach to you all the time. Be healthy. Gotta take care of yourself. And I mean this always when I say it. I don't just, you know, mouth it off. I really mean it. God bless each and every one of you and all of your families. And thank you so much for supporting me as you have over the years, and how you continue to. And by the way, Rumble, go on there. You're going to hear some stuff out of me on Rumble. So go there. Current issues, what I talk about. Yes, I'll see you next time.